Baddest of all the musicians on the planet.
Who was the most quixotic and mischievous.
So what I want you to do is cover the amplifiers in petrol.
I thought I was going to die.
The police were coming to arrest us. You know, he had that ridiculous voice.
Who the hell is that?
Mystical, magical aura.
It's taking this spaceship to a new place.
In the heat and the rain, with whips and chains.
Ritchie decided it was time to get a hit.
People would move and the tension would shift and people would have to leave or be fired.
Yeah, you know, you're just all fired up.
That ridiculous. I said, I can't work with this guy anymore. Just get him out of my life.
And Ronnie spoke up.
You know I don't play piano. I'm a singer.
I said, get out of here. After what he's done.
For me, that was a little disappointing to see that happening.
But he is difficult to work with.
Ronnie didn't get any royalties from Rainbow until after he'd died.
And true musicians are almost slaves to that.
I think Ritchie would be remembered as somebody wild and untamed.
Through it all, there was Ritchie Blackmore.
With a career spanning decades, from Deep Purple's explosive rise in the late 60s to the neoclassical majesty of Rainbow and the medieval mystique of Blackmore's Night, he remains a figure of unmatched complexity. Ritchie Blackmore's legend is shadowed by a reputation that borders on the mythic. Tales of guitars smashed over sound issues.
Growing up a Deep Purple fan, it's just like they were the biggest and the fucking baddest of all the musicians on the planet. And fucking Blackmore, oh my fucking God.
It really was stunning.
Hundreds of thousands of people there. It's being filmed.
There must have been 350,000 people there. I think 100,000 burned the fence down, and so there was probably 350,000. When we look at, you know, the visual images from above, you can't imagine what it's like to walk onto a stage and you can't see, or you can see the sky line, but in the skyline there's people.
Ritchie Blackmore is renowned for being unpredictable, the man in black, moody, volatile, if you will. And I think he's earned that reputation over the years, absolutely, because the man has done some amazing things, from California Jam.
Of all the guys in Deep Purple, it was Ritchie who was the most quixotic and mischievous. He ran around, he put it back to the audience, threw his guitar around, and of course he did a bit of a Townsend sometimes and smashed the guitar at the end.
And Blackmore actually said to the cameraman, one of the cameramen, don't get in my face. If you do, I'm going to smash your camera up.
You know, he said he could hear this guy going, "Limey, get back over there so I can," you know, and all this kind of stuff. And he killed the camera. It was brilliant showmanship.
And the guy got in his face, so Blackmore just hit the camera, which you can see on film. He just smashes the camera up. That's the sort of thing he can do. And he actually said, I warned you, so therefore I told you I'd do it, and I did.
So I went to my roadie. I said, what I'm going to do is blow up the amplifiers. So what I want you to do is cover the amplifiers in petrol. I'll go across one side of the stage. You douse my Marshalls, dummy Marshalls, with petrol.
Ronnie Quinton, his beloved guitar tech, who is no longer with us, loaded way too much gunpowder into Ritchie's stuff. So when it blew Pacey's glasses off, I thought I was going to die.
Exploded and like blew a hole in the stage. Pacey's glasses got blown off, so he can't see anything. It made some cameraman temporarily deaf. So, but it looked great.
I was a total novice outside of the remarkable schooling of working men's clubs, and it's just a walk in the park, you know.
The police were coming to arrest us for blowing up the stage, being dangerous to the people, what have you. You know, it worked, and the idea was to upstage ELP, which I think we did.
Sudden lineup changes or onstage walk-offs have cemented his status as rock's most enigmatic and intimidating guitarist.
I barely saw Ritchie in Deep Purple when I was in the band. Ritchie was an isolator. And this is in the days where there was no separate dressing rooms. Well, he had his own dressing room. He stayed at different hotels, basically. And he never partook in any group endeavors. No after-dinner parties, no.
When Ritchie, when he's playing on stage, tries to blast everyone off the stage, it's a kind of competition. One of the things Ritchie said to me when I joined Deep Purple, he said, "You've got to bear this in mind." He said, "I don't mean it badly," he said, "but I'm going to try and blow you off stage every night." I said, "All right, great." I said, "Well, in that case, I'm going to try and do the same to you."
He was, as I say, an alpha guy, so was I. He wanted to control, I wanted to control. So we butted heads because of that. You know, we still respected each other, but we never got on. We just couldn't be in the same room. That was the problem. I wasn't speaking to him. He wasn't speaking to me. We weren't being creative. Paul Rodgers, to me was just mind-blowing, his voice. I wanted Ian to be able to do that, and I couldn't relate to Ian screaming and yelling and that Elvis Presley impersonation. He said, "How do you want me to sing?" "I'll sing any way you want me to sing." And I went, "Ian, you can't sing that way. That's a blues thing, you know." And I think after that turned him off. He was rejected. So we went downhill from there. We started looking for other people. We found Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale.
He was famously difficult to please, and his relentless pursuit of perfection often alienated bandmates and even fans.
I think Ritchie Blackmore spent a lot of his career looking for the perfect lineup, and when he found it, he still wasn't happy with it.
Ritchie Blackmore, he's like the Deep in Deep Purple. He's a mystery within a riddle. He's not the easiest man to get on with.
I've always had a theory about Deep Purple Mark III, and that is Blackmore realised when David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes joined to replace Ian Gillan and Roger Glover, respectively, on vocals and bass, or in Glenn's case, bass and vocals, that he was bringing into the band elements that he wasn't comfortable with. These were people who veered a little bit towards funk and soul, which Blackmore didn't feel to be part of what Deep Purple were or should be.
Our first LP, Burn, was great. We had Mistreated, Burn, and it was all working. Now, the second record we made, Stormbringer, was good, but John, I think Ian, and even Dave, and of course Glenn, were getting into this funk stuff. And I'm like, that's not me. It's got to be rock, blues. I don't want to be involved in that.
Me, John, and David wrote Holy Man together, and it was, you can't do it right with the one you love. It was a group compositions. Hold on.
When it came to Stormbringer, their second album, John Lord told me that when they were in the studio, he realised Blackmore was starting to write stuff for a different project and had lost interest in Deep Purple, to the extent that when it came to a guitar solo, Blackmore had always been so protective of his own area, just to say, "Tell you what, John, you take this solo, just do it in keyboards. I won't bother with it." It's John that actually said at the time, "I realised then Blackmore really didn't have much interest in what we were doing and was going to take a different direction." And Blackmore himself has openly said, "I wasn't into the funk and soul at all, really didn't feel comfortable with it. So therefore, he decided, time to go. I have to quit." Now, at the time, he wasn't prepared to quit the band so much as take a side project.
When Ritchie's in a band, there's going to be tension and friction, and that's the way it's going to be. And as soon as comfortable things set in, people would move and the tension would shift and people would have to leave or be fired, And Verne was the typical example of 5 guys living together, enjoying the parody of playing these great songs live, at least for 6 months, you know, while it was new.
He's bawled people out, vocalists out in public before. He's had an ongoing public feud with Ian Gillan now for 3 decades. He's had an ongoing public feud with David Coverdale for nearly as long. And he doesn't seem to do anything to try and smooth things over. As far as he's concerned, that's the way he is, and that's the way people have to accept him.
Ritchie Blackmore left Deep Purple in 1975.
Blackmore left Purple because they were going in a more funk direction.
I went, we've got to form a band because this is just, it's just flowing, you know. There's none of this, no committee meetings, you know, and no briefcases involved and trying to get hold of people that were never around. Because Purple became a big business, the monster. So it's when I left and formed Rainbow.
I remember I was in a car. Deep Purple had just broken up. Disco was starting to make its scene. The world was upside down. And all of a sudden, Man on the Silver Mountain comes on the radio. And I was like, yeah, you know, you're just all fired up.
The man on the Silver Mountain.
I remember going to Munich to do an album, and Ritchie was in the same studio. And he said, oh, I got to play you a song, Stargazer, full blast. I was blown away. That was like a masterpiece.
Rainbow was born out of Blackmore's dissatisfaction with Deep Purple's musical direction, particularly during the Stormbringer era.
As a fan, it seemed like it was one more step into what was heavy metal.
By the time Rainbow gets going, you've got the Mount Rushmore of heavy rock, Purple, Sabbath, Zeppelin. All of them shared a common denominator in the sense that they were all coming from the blues.
I don't think Rainbow ever equaled the success of Deep Purple, not in the public's perception or in the critic's mind, should we say, despite the fact that it did produce some great music. It was and it was a great live band. It was very entertaining and gave Ritchie Blackmore an opportunity to play with other people.
He sought more control, a darker sound, and a chance to explore classical and Baroque influences that had fascinated him since his early days.
It was a band in his own image, which Deep Purple were never. Deep Purple were partly his image and partly his creativity, but it belonged to everybody else. Rainbow was him. Rainbow is his definition, his moment of stepping into the spotlight and saying, this is me, this is where I want to go.
With Rainbow, Blackmore didn't just hire musicians, he shaped them. His collaboration with Ronnie James Dio, Graham Bonnet, Joe Lynn Turner, and Dougie White helped birth of vocal legends.
As far as the personnel changes go, you would need an abacus and a Cray computer to figure that one out. That family tree is tall, wide, and complicated. But through it all, there was Ritchie Blackmore.
While his later work shifted stylistically, depending on his muse, proving that reinvention could be a core part of staying artistically alive. Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, often simply known as Rainbow, began as a collaboration between Blackmore and Ronnie James Dio.
You know I don't play piano. I'm a singer.
I just loved the guy. I just genuinely loved him. It was born into him from generations of eons of lifetimes ago to be kind.
Who was then the frontman of the blues rock band Elf.
I always had places that I wanted to get to. Deep Purple were my favorite band. We must have done probably 8 full tours with the band. So Elf took up on the world. That was the beginning, certainly for me.
So over the course of the next couple of years touring, Ronnie was always around us. I fell in love with the sound of his voice. Then I fell in love with his personality. Then I fell in love with him as a human being.
9 years with the break in my bed.
That's when I did, I think, 16th Century Greensleeves with Ronnie.
Ritchie and I really had the same kind of musical feelings. We were engrossed in classical kind of music, Bach especially. And we felt that there was a great place in music to kind of revive that mystical, magical aura and put it into today's kind of context.
There's no sun in the shadow of the wizard.
Impressed by Elf's talent, particularly Dio's powerful and emotive voice.
And the things we wrote were so different. That was the band I wanted to be in forever. That was my chance to do what I was born to do, which was to write classically oriented fantasy kind of music.
It's very exciting. We had Ronnie Dio. He could come around and write a tune like that. I'd give him an idea, he'd put the top line to it, everything was fresh. He had that ridiculous voice.
All I see is fame. Where is your star?
Even though Ronnie could really sing blues if he wanted to, lyrically, he was never the victim in his lyrics. It was more of a sage.
Ronnie sang about mystical, magical stars and universe and dreams.
Is it far? Is it far?
Blackmore invited Dio and the rest of Elf to record with him.
Ritchie left and went to start, putting Rainbow together with the guys in Elf, pretty much,
Resulting in the debut album Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, 1975.
He actually recorded an album with Ronnie and the guys in Elf, and we didn't know about this.
That was done quickly and done very well, and we had a good time playing it.
We put the LP down in a month. It's come out, and being modest and saying it's kind of brilliant. It's come out very well.
Ronnie was now firmly embedded into the gothic and medieval rock of Rainbow. He'd found his niche, he'd found his new character.
I think Ronnie suited the band the most. This is how I sing, and it had balls, big ones.
Dio's voice, booming yet melodic, capable of both operatic grandeur and raw power, became Rainbow's sonic cornerstone.
Certainly, with Dio singing, it was a remarkable step forward in that genre. I mean, a lot of people today, they listen to those records and they think that's where it really started, It's almost as if he's playing more on those records. There's like more of Ritchie on those records.
Ritchie Blackmore was back. Then I first heard Ronnie James Dio's voice. And I was like, who the hell is that?
I believe, yes, I believe.
He was like a whole universe that was concealed within one man.
There's a very great feel of melodic heavy rock on the Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow album. Even the cover has a certain medieval element with the guitar in the shape of a castle. And I think that's where Blackmore wanted to go. He wanted to produce that form of music. It was a new direction for him. And to be honest, it's a direction he's never really strayed from since.
Ronnie James Dio and Ritchie Blackmore wanted to explore this kind of neoclassical heavy rock music that is something way beyond. So Rainbow is taking this spaceship to a new place.
In the heat and the rain, with whips and chains.
Dio and Blackmore reached their creative peak together. Tracks like Stargazer and A Light in the Black combined symphonic elements with metal intensity, effectively laying the groundwork for what would later be known as power metal.
That's what I do with my music. I'm a narrator. I give people avenues which they can go down, safe avenues.
This is not just another rock band. It's going to take what we used to call heavy rock into a whole vista that really hasn't existed before. And it was all about this dynamic between this incredible guitarist and this extraordinary singer that almost everybody had never heard of.
Hot wind moving fast across the desert.
I don't shove it down their throats. They're your dreams to try to attain. I don't tell them this is what they must do. So a narrator is what I am.
And so at one point, the world was upside down and it turned it right side up again.
In the Runaways days, I would put on Stargazer. All my dreams and all my hopes would come out. That gave me all the strength and all the power I ever needed in guitar playing and music and just my everyday shit.
We feel that our time has arrived.
Despite the fruitful partnership, tensions eventually grew.
By the time we got to Long Live Rock and Roll, things were getting... Ronnie was more into his girlfriend, Wendy, and things were starting to slow down for ideas.
And then he went on tour with Rainbow. And then he asked me to go on the road with him. And I'd only known him for a few weeks. And I said, no, I can't quit my job. I'll come for a couple of days, which ended up being a couple of months, which ended up being for the rest of my life.
We were both young and we were experiencing the road, and it was fun for a while. And then it got a little bit tense.
Blackmore wanted to move toward a more commercial, radio-friendly direction, while Dio remained committed to the band's heavier and more fantastical roots.
It was, other people breathing into his ear that the material that we were writing was too fantastical. And said, you think maybe you should try to write some songs more about relationships? And I said, no, I wasn't going to write love songs.
Ronnie Dio and Ritchie Blackmore had a chemistry, but then as Blackmore got further into the Rainbow career, he saw himself as wanting to become a little bit more commercial. And Dio very much wanted to stay into the myth and dragons field that he put forward in the lyrics, metaphorical rather than physical and actual. So that the two of them went their separate ways, as we know.
Rainbow are enormous in Japan. Rainbow are bigger in Japan than the Stones. Rainbow are huge in Britain and Europe. Rainbow are not huge in America.
In America, Rainbow never got there with Ronnie as the singer. And I know that bothered Blackmore tremendously, and he was consumed with getting Rainbow on U.S. radio.
This divergence in artistic vision led to Dio's departure after the Long Live Rock and Roll album in 1978.
Long Live Rock and Roll was the last Rainbow album. They're working on the next one, early stages. Ritchie decided it was time to get a hit.
Wendy apparently had told him transatlantically, called him up and said, Ronnie, Ritchie's on the front page of Circus magazine in America, and you two aren't. It should have been the three of us. That's what did it. And he said to me, Coda and I are not going to we're not your sidekicks, and we're not standing for it. I don't want to work with someone that's that trivial, that ridiculous. I said, I can't work with this guy anymore. Just get him out of my life.
He stayed true to himself, and I think it really pissed off a few people.
It got very tense, and so Ronnie was actually fired.
Now where do we go?
Though their partnership was relatively brief, the Dio era of Rainbow is widely regarded as the band's golden age. Albums like Rising and Long Live Rock and Roll have become canonical works in the heavy metal genre.
His best work with Rainbow is definitely with Ronnie James Dio. And we are talking about 3 studio albums: Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, the classic Rainbow Rising, which is the great record, and also Long Live Rock and Roll.
Many fans and critics believe that without Dio's early involvement, Rainbow may never have reached the creative heights it did. His fusion of mythical imagery with thunderous vocal delivery gave the band its unique identity and helped shape the future of heavy music.
He was great. He was funny, strong-willed, and he believed in what he did. Go for what you believe in, and that's what Ronnie was. He was a hard fist coming at you.
Ronnie James Dio is the only guy who appeared in all 3 albums, but those albums really represent what Blackmore could do.
Ronnie James Dio's role in Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow was nothing short of transformative. Though the band bore Blackmore's name, it was Dio's voice, vision, and lyrical imagination that elevated Rainbow to legendary status.
I'm always pleased to either hear it or see it in print that was the classic lineup of Rainbow, that I was in. And that makes me feel good.
Together, they created a body of work that continues to inspire and captivate metal fans decades later, a testament to a partnership that, however fleeting, was undeniably magical.
I remembered Graham Bonnet from the Marbles, and I said to Roger Glover, I said, what about trying to find him? I wonder what he's doing these days.
I was staying at Bruce's house one day, and he played me a song, Since You've Been Gone. He said, well, Ritchie wants to do it. I said, get out of here. After what he's done, especially with Rainbow Rising, how could he want to do this?
I mean, for me personally, Rainbow ceased to be the real Rainbow when, you know, the pop tunes started happening and the hit singles in the charts. And I mean, you can't knock the success of it, and they were good quality pop songs, but it lost that sort of, you know, we are a heavy rock band, serious about the music, you know. For me, that was a little disappointing to see that happening.
You know, Ronnie spent, you know, the first 10, 15 years of his career putting on a suit, looking for the hit song. You know, this is something he'd left behind many years ago and believed that the unique selling point of Rainbow had nothing to do with Since You've Been Gone, Baby. And Ronnie spoke up.
That was the time where Rainbow did get airplay. In America, it wasn't with Ronnie.
For Ronnie, on a personal level, it was a disaster. He and Wendy were in a situation where the house they lived in, you know, was owned by the band. Ronnie didn't even see any royalties from... This is a guy who co-wrote all the big songs. Ronnie didn't get any royalties from Rainbow until after he died. So they had no money. You know, Ronnie was a very, very proud man. He didn't want to admit that he'd been hurt by this. He didn't want to admit that maybe he'd blown it.
For Blackmore, music was a serious endeavor. His temper and unpredictability were often the byproduct of a singular focus, the pursuit of musical transcendence.
Well, he cultivates an image, you know, and a part of that is the bad boy. So nothing prepares you when you meet him for the charm and how quietly spoken he is and how direct he can be. But he is difficult to work with. Anybody who's any good is difficult to work with. He has a way of, you know, cutting through the self-indulgence, cutting through the dross, and getting to the meat of the matter, whether it's music or your travel arrangements or the way you present yourself. You know, he wants it right, and he normally gets it. You know, he knows how to run a band. You know, it's not an easy thing to do.
A well-oiled professional machine, run well. Everybody was disciplined and professional and, you know, good attitude. I got on great with Cozy. We were, you know, pals. Ronnie was a lovely bloke. As soon as I was in the band, you know, I was kind of like a young lad. So he sort of took me under his wing, and you know, and I felt comfortable in it, you know. And I got on fine with Ritchie too. Never had a problem.
In a world that often celebrates mediocrity, Blackmore's refusal to settle made him a menacing figure to anyone not playing at his level. He demanded brilliance, and often got it, whether from himself or others.
I'd had people say to me, "Oh, be careful of Ritchie. You know, he chews people up and spits them out, and you may not last long, and you might be out of a gig and all that sort of thing." Oh, isn't Blackmore weird? Isn't he difficult? Isn't he hard to deal with? Isn't he an arsehole? Isn't he this? Isn't he that? I didn't have a problem. I got on and did the job, didn't rock the boat. You know, I wasn't a yes man, but I just, you know, did the job professionally. I was reliable and I didn't let anybody down. I think Ritchie's can be demanding, but that's not a bad thing. You know, he's very disciplined and he expects everyone else to be disciplined, and that's not a bad thing. You know, I actually enjoyed it.
Ritchie Blackmore remains a paradox. A recluse who once dominated stages, a classical romantic in a hard rock world, a man of silence and fury. His influence resonates in every guitarist who dares to mix discipline with danger, elegance with aggression.
I think with Ritchie Blackmore, like most great musicians, like most musicians who've achieved anything, there's always a fine balance between lack of confidence and overconfidence, ego, if you will. I'm sure there are moments when Blackmore doubts himself and doesn't quite know where he really wants to go and whether what he's doing is worthwhile. But of course, that's complemented by other times when his ego just gets way out of control and the man himself is capable of walking off stage at Wembley Arena without doing an encore because he says the crowd don't deserve it. Now, that's a fascinating thing to say, but also I think there is a point in the fact that what Blackmore says is encores should be about a rapport. It has to be something earned by the band and by the audience. And when neither really achieves that, what's the point in doing it? Because you're just deluding yourselves. It becomes just a matter of rote and not something that's part of a spontaneous effect. And I think that's what makes Blackmore tick. He's such a complex character. I have no doubts he has crises of confidence on occasion, but hides it well because he's also become a bit reclusive. And also on top of that, I think he's also very bad at dealing with people. He's not a natural band leader. Over the years, you look at the way he's treated people in Rainbow especially. He's not somebody who seems to nurture and guide. He offers the stick, but never actually sort of has the carrot as well dangling.
To understand Ritchie Blackmore is to accept that he cannot be fully understood. He is the dark wizard of rock, untouchable in his craft, inspiring in his vision, and threatening in his intensity.
If he wants to switch into something else, that's because his inner musical inspiration pulls him there, and true musicians are almost slaves to that.
I think Ritchie Blackmore is a man who doesn't suffer fools gladly. And as a guitarist, as a musician, has always taken his craft very seriously. Whatever else he might do in life, there certainly leans towards practical jokes. He takes his musicianship very seriously. I think he hates the fact that there are people out there who are overrated, who indulge themselves and they really have no right.
I think Ritchie would be remembered as somebody wild and untamed to the end of his days, and I think that's a magnificent thing to be.
And that's exactly why he remains one of the most fascinating and enduring figures in music history.
There is nothing better than just sitting with the guitar and emoting. I can be in Hawaii, and everybody's on water skiings and things, and watching the dolphins, but I'm in my room just looking out, looking at the horizons. I've got to be playing. And that's my friend, I'm kind of emoting with.
The difference between me and most guitarists is that I don't just play fast. I try to make people feel something. If they don't feel anything, I haven't done my job. Ritchie Blackmore.